Not all verbs in Latin follow the regular pattern of endings, and these exceptions are the dreaded irregular verbs. Memorization works great for mastering these scourges of a language, but so does understanding why a particular verb is irregular. I mean, if you learn what about the verb makes it irregular, then it becomes a little bit less so, and a lot easier to remember, despite its irregularities. And also, the more you see an irregular verb, the better you'll be able to deal with the irregularity. In this video, I will discuss the irregular verb fero, ferre, tuli, latus, and its many compounds. Fero is one of the most common words in Latin. It means bring or bear, but it can also take on meanings like say or endure. So learn it and be familiar with its irregularity. And I'm sure from looking at those principal parts, you can see that there's a lot to talk about. But first, the present tense. Fero isn't horribly unusual here. Its verb stem is fer, F-E-R, and the present tense goes fero, fers, fert, fermus, fertis, ferunt. So it looks like a third conjugation verb with the O, I, and U in these forms, but in fers, fert, and fertis, the I drops out before the present personal endings. The imperatives are fer and ferte, and also in the infinitive, there's no vowel between the stem fer and the infinitive ending re. I'm going to come back to the reason why in a little bit once I go through an overview of all of its forms. The imperfect is pretty standard. Ferrebam, ferrebas, ferrebat, ferrebamus, ferrebatis, and ferrebant, just like the third conjugation. And because of this, the future tense looks like a third conjugation verb. Ferram, ferres, ferret, ferremus, ferretis, ferent. To form the perfect tense, we go to the principal parts and notice that the third part is tuli. I'll get to why in a little bit. But once you get over this, you'll see that the perfect system is pretty regular. Tuli, tulisti, tulit, tulimus, tulistis, tulerunt in the perfect, tuleram, tuleras, tulerat, tuleramus, tuleratis, tulerant in the pluperfect, and tulero, tuleris, tulerit, tulerimus, tuleritis, tulerant in the future perfect. I didn't go into the present system of passives because you really just swap off the active personal ending and replace it with the passive one. But the perfect passive system looks a little strange because the fourth principal part of fero is latus. Weird, right? So that makes the perfect passive, with its masculine subject, latus sum, latus es, latus est, lati sumus, lati estis, lati sunt. And you'll form the pluperfect and future perfect in the standard way by changing the tense of sum. So fero is very famous for its compounds, which are almost as common as fero itself. So here's a list of these compounds. Notice that even though the prefix may change, the root part of the verb almost always stays the same. And many of these come into English, like both refer and relate, both of which come from different principal parts of the same verb, refero. So there's really two strange things going on with fero. The first is why the present tense drops the I in some of its forms, like in fert, she brings, when you'd expect it to be ferret. And the second is why the perfect active and perfect passive look so different from fero. Now a bit of warning, I'm going to be talking about some linguistic phenomena. It's not an easy explanation, but it is the explanation. And it really helps you understand why fero acts the way that it does. So, why is it fert and not ferret? This comes down to the concept of vowel syncope. Syncope is really just another term for dropping sounds from a word, especially a vowel in an unstressed syllable. So we see it in English words like in camera, where that E in the middle is lost, camera. Or family, which sounds like it almost has two syllables, family. Imagine if these words were written today as they were pronounced. Each would lose that middle syllable, camera, family. That's syncope. In Italian, the word for hot is caldo, which comes from the Latin calidus. The syncope is the removal of the I in the middle. And in fact, we see the syncope starting to occur for this word even in Latin. Sometimes it's calidus, but other times it's caldus. The hot room in the Roman baths is both calidarium and caldarium. The same thing works for the term for the cold room, frigidarium, and the word for cold, frigidus. In late Latin, this becomes frigdus, leading to the Italian word for cold, freddo. So syncope can happen in Latin after an R. So the word for boy, puer, actually has the stem of puero, but the O is lost by syncope, giving us puer. The same for field, ager, with the stem agro. But here we have to add in an E. Okay, so back to fero. The forms fers, fert, and fertis all suffer syncope. And while you'd expect ferris, ferret, and ferritis, the unstressed I drops out from usage. But the I doesn't fall away before the M in fermos. In a different way, the infinitive for fero is ferre, F-E-R-R-E. So the original infinitive ending in Latin is an S-E, se, which becomes re, R-E, through the concept of rhoticization. When a vowel comes before it, it turns into an R. This S turns to an R. But we can see the SE ending in the infinitive esse. For fero, we take the verb stem fer and add the SE ending, but the S assimilates to the R and becomes one with it. So that's how we get ferre. Okay, one more big explanation, back to the principal parts. So why tuli and latus? Well, fero, ferre is really a defective verb, and that means it only has present forms, and its perfect forms were lacking. They were gone. They weren't being used. They were absent. And that's where the concept of suppletion comes in. So suppletion is where the language grabs forms from another word and brings them over to fill out, and that's what the Latin verb suppleo means, the rest of the grammatical blanks in a different word. In English, we see suppletion with the verb to go. Today I go to school. Yesterday I went to school. The forms of went are used to fill in for the past tense of go, but they're not really the same word. So fero, lacking any perfect tense forms, took the perfect tense from a verb that means kind of the same thing, tollo, tollere, to lift up. And it might originally have been tuli, but that's neither here nor there. The fourth principal part was something like latus, but that beginning T was lost. And because tollo lost its perfect tense to fero, it assumed the perfect forms of suffero, sustuli, and sublatus. Okay, that's a lot of linguistics to describe the funky goings-on with fero. It's a very unusual verb, but it's relatively easy to show the irregularities. 3 forms in the present tense that drop an I, the infinitive with a double R, and the unusually looking third and fourth principal parts.